Thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. I'm Jim Cardle. Well, the Texas legislature is headed into the home stretch, and a number of issues are coming to the forefront. Sanctuary cities legislation has recently been acted on by the House. Education reform seems to be gaining traction, and of course the state budget is something every legislature has to do. State Representative Ron Simmons was elected in 2012. He's a member of the powerful Appropriations Committee as well as the Transportation Committee, is also on the board of directors of the Autism Society of America, and he's an officer in the Texas Conservative Coalition. What can we expect in the final weeks of the legislature? We're pleased to be able to visit today with Ron Simmons from House District 65. State Representative Ron Simmons, thanks for joining us. We appreciate you coming in today.
Oh, Jim, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You have had a lot of work going on. Just mentioned that you're going to be working this Saturday. I want to be respectful of your time and just jump right in if we can and start with probably something that most folks realize is the one thing that constitutionally the legislature is required to do, and that's pass a state budget. You all have passed your version in the House. Senate's done the same over on the Senate side of the body, but you're about $500 million off in a $106 million budget. That may not seem like a lot, but there's some differences. Talk a little bit about where you think we are in the budget right
Yeah,
now.
well, that's a great, and it's such a great system, Jim, and that the House comes up with their budget separately from the Senate, and then we come together in what's called a conference committee. And so we'll put 5 of our top budget people with 5 of their top budget people together, and they'll just work out the differences. I think we're making good progress in that. I am not on the conference committee, but in conversations I've had with Chairman Zerwas and some of our members, I think we're making good progress. I think we'll get there. It'll require some compromise on both sides. There's no question about it. The revenue stream is a little tighter as we project. Now that could change, but it's a little tighter as we project going forward, and that means we have to tighten our belt in some areas. And that can be difficult when you have a fast-growing state, but it's just something that we have to do.
You mentioned a fast-growing state. I was going to ask in particular, since you're on the Appropriations Committee, the all-powerful Appropriations Committee, particularly the Transportation Subcommittee that you serve on there. We've got a problem in Texas, and it's called growth per se, and a lot of that means managing getting around, facilitating and funding transportation. What might you talk about in particular on transportation that you've seen either positive or negative for the budget?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, the positive thing we did is in last session, the voters agreed to pass what we call Proposition 7, which was a state constitutional amendment that put additional sales tax revenue above a certain threshold that when we met that to go straight into the highway fund. And we're projected for that to be over $4 billion in the next biennium, 2018 and 19, in addition to the other money that we've given them as well. So we've given them projected over the next 10 years about $70 billion. So now the challenge is even in that, it's really not enough when you're growing 1,000 people a day, 1 million new students every 2 years, and 70% of those people living within the 5 or 6 major cities and corridors, but that only makes up about 20% of the land mass. So we've got some big challenges ahead of us on how we move people around appropriately. And in Texas, we like our cars and our trucks, so we have to build roads with that money.
You are from House District 65 out of Carrollton.
Correct.
A lot of folks will know that the DFW area is a little bit constrained during rush hour if you're on LBJ. Is there anything in particular for your district you might want to mention, or any particular growth needs in the DFW area?
One thing that we're doing in DFW is we are expanding all of our major thoroughfares, and they're either under construction or in the planning stage. I-35E is being expanded. 635 got expanded on the west side, now will be expanded on the east side. And then we're also continuing, as Houston has done, to look at even further outer loops around so people can get around the Metroplex a little bit easier.
I want to thank everybody at this point for joining us again for this edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers, visiting with State Representative Ron Simmons from District 65. You, sir, are also involved in another aspect of of the session that's key, not only budget-wise, but debate-wise, and that has to do with education. In particular, you've got one of your own bills, HB 1335, I believe, for special needs education choice. I want to give you a chance to talk about what you're trying to do there, particularly with your autism involvement in the family, and what's the outlook for education this session, particularly that bill.
Well, since I've been in the House, I've been a champion for people with disabilities, especially children. And we've done some good things so far, but we've got more to do. One of the areas that has been reported widely on is that Texas has failed in providing adequate education for our special needs children. The Chronicle did lots of articles on that. In fact, we're subject to paying over $130 million back to the federal government because we did not maintain our operation of effort, maintenance of effort in special needs. And so I've got a bill, House Bill 1335, that allows this small group of families the opportunity to have education choice, that if the public school doesn't fit their needs, they can choose what's best for that child. If the public school is fitting their needs, Jim, they're not going to move them. It's only if they have a need that the public school can't meet. So I'm excited about that, and I'm hoping to get that to the floor in the next week.
And you in particular, Representative, have family history with a adult son that has autism, and we didn't even know a decade ago or so about the autism spectrum. Talk about your personal involvement.
We have a 32-year-old son, Daniel, who's doing well and has a mild form of autism. But when we went through his experience in school, there was just very little option. So we went from one school to the other, to homeschool, to private school, to whatever. And Lisa and I could afford all the options for him. But so many of these families can't afford it. And so these kids end up getting pulled out of school, okay, and just basically having daycare. And then they end up being potentially a ward of the state, or certainly a financial challenge for their parents and other family members.
So you're working on HB 1335. How about education in general? There's been a lot of debate back and forth about Senator or Lieutenant Governor Patrick's idea for school choice. School funding's always an issue.
Right.
What do you see maybe as coming out of the session?
Well,
on
again,
dollars in the classroom?
Even in this, I think there's room for compromise. The House passed a bill, House Bill 21, which had some additional money in it for public schools, which is trying to take one of the first big steps towards changing how schools are funded. And I think that's a good step that Speaker Strauss and Chairman Huberty did. But in the Senate wants to make sure that we have some choice. So I think there's room in that bill to have a negotiation to give some additional money to public schools, but also to provide some choice as well. So I'm hopeful that they'll come together on a compromise on that and get a win for everybody.
You've been a member of the Autism Society of America's Board of Directors.
Right.
Appreciate your efforts in that regard. You're also on the board of directors of the Texas Conservative Coalition. I want to turn to an issue that's also been in the news quite a bit, and that has to do with sanctuary cities. Initially started in the Senate, you all picked up SB 4. Charlie Guerin is the House sponsor there, and some would say that the House bill is stronger. Some have said that they weren't sure the House was going to take any activity. Tell us what you saw during that debate here recently, and what you think about the sanctuary cities effort.
Well, first of all, thanks for mentioning TCC, because Texas Conservative Coalition is one of the stalwart conservative groups out there. And we depend a lot on them for their analysis of bills and legislation and ideas, so proud to be a part of them. But on sanctuary cities specifically, I'm not sure who thought we wouldn't bring it up. I mean, it was well known in the House that this would be a bill that we would pass. We passed it before. We passed one in 2011, ended up not getting out of the Senate. And so we took this very seriously, and we understand there are concerns on the other side of the aisle. But for conservatives and for Republicans, this was an important issue. And if you'll look at almost virtually every single amendment, our Republicans in the House stayed very firmly together. And we voted them down 90-something to 50-something every single time, because we know that border security and controlling that any way the state can, and we're limited to what we can do, is very important. So I'm excited about it. I think the Senate will probably take our legislation and just pass it out just as is, and we'll be moving forward.
So you're seeing activity there, activity on Privacy Act, better known as the bathroom bill. What's the general mood in the House at this stage with just a couple weeks left? Are you ready for the home stretch? Are people discouraged, encouraged? What's the mood of your peers?
I think the answer is yes to all of that.
Okay, good
meaning that we've got about 28 days left, and the tension is certainly there because people have bills that they're trying to get done for their district, or just issues that are important to them. That the way our system is set up, it's really set up for the cream to rise to the top. Now, sometimes, your cream is my sour milk.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't always mean my cream gets to rise to the top, but generally the things rise to the top that are the most important to Texas. And so we'll have that happening. I'm convinced of that. I'm optimistic about getting the budget done. We've got some pro-life issues that'll be coming to the floor here in the next several days. Again, hope to get some school choice out there, maybe some more school financing. But I'm confident that we'll end up, when we sit back and look at it, we'll have another great conservative session just as we did last time, and I think it'll be good for Texas.
You mentioned, one final question I'll throw in there, you mentioned the pro-life effort. I know you were part of a press conference or two here recently. Mm-hmm. Another area that a lot of critics have said they didn't think the House would have the gumption to take up. Are you looking forward to having something passed there, or what's the outlook on the pro-life front?
Absolutely. I think we'll have something passed. You never get everything everybody wants, but our system, again, is set up to make it very hard to do it. I passed the wrongful birth legislation out of the House. It's been passed out of the Senate. It's been passed out of committee. It's sitting in calendars. I'm confident that'll get to the floor, and that'll basically just say, look, we're not a state that's going to say that you can sue a doctor because you could have aborted your baby. That's just not going to happen here in Texas.
Well, speaking of not getting everything you want, I'd love to visit further with you, but we're going to have to leave it there and let you get on with your busy day. State Representative Ron Simmons from House District 65 out of Carrollton, we really appreciate you coming in today.
Great. Thanks for having me very much, Jim. Thanks for what you do.
Folks, we appreciate you tuning into this edition of Texas Insider TV with State Representative Ron Simmons, a member of the Appropriations Committee and an officer on the Texas Conservative Coalition Board. Remember, you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle. Thanks for joining us.